Something big just happened in Venezuela, and it's shocking the world. 2026 is turning into a very strange year. The U.S. just carried out a unique operation in Venezuela that could change everything. What does this mean for where the world is heading? Because Jesus said something 2,000 years ago that suddenly feels like it was written for this exact moment. You will be shocked when you find the 4 strangest things about this operation and what it means for Christians. Number 1. The announcement that shook the world. January 3rd, 2026. Early morning. While most of America is still asleep, President Trump posts on Truth Social at 4:21 a.m. Eastern Time. Then he holds a press conference from Mar-a-Lago. Last night, U.S. forces executed Operation Absolute Resolve, a precise law enforcement action with military support. Nicolas Maduro and his wife are in U.S. custody. He calls it justice. He compares it to history. The 1989 arrest of Panama's Manuel Noriega, another leader accused of drug trafficking and corruption, removed by American forces. But Trump is careful with his words. He doesn't call it an invasion. He doesn't call it regime change. He frames it as enforcement. Enforcement of a 2020 U.S. indictment charging Maduro. Within minutes, the world reacts. Markets shake. Oil prices fluctuate wildly. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, and nobody knows what happens to them now. World leaders scramble to respond. Russia condemns it as aggression. China demands an emergency UN session. Cuba declares 3 days of mourning. Latin America splits down the middle. Some governments quietly relieved, others publicly outraged. If this was just law enforcement, why did it require over 150 aircraft? Why the military precision? Why did it look and sound like war? Now watch what happens next. Within hours, international condemnation. Reuters and Al Jazeera documented the global reaction. And here's what you need to understand. The actual military strike in Venezuela matters, yes. But the reaction, the what happens next paralysis, that's the rumors of wars part. And according to Matthew 24, this pattern doesn't decrease. It intensifies, like birth pains. Hold that thought. We'll return to it. But before we understand what happened, we need to understand the man at the center of it all, Nicolas Maduro. He started as a bus driver in Caracas, then a union organizer, then a loyal follower of Hugo Chavez, the charismatic revolutionary who promised to lift Venezuela's poor out of poverty and build a socialist paradise. When Chavez died in 2013, Maduro inherited the presidency. At first, oil wealth masked the cracks in the system. But soon, the collapse came. And it came hard. Hyperinflation. Currency worth less than the paper it's printed on. Store shelves empty. Hospitals without medicine. Teachers earning $3 a month. Parents watching their children go hungry. Over 7 million Venezuelans fled their homeland. The largest refugee exodus in the entire Western Hemisphere. Families torn apart. Homes abandoned. Dreams shattered. In 2020, the United States indicted Maduro, allegedly partnering with Colombian rebel groups to traffic drugs. By 2025, the bounty on his head had risen to $50 million. Election after election, he won. But the results were impossible to believe. The Venezuelan people took to the streets. Millions of them. Protesting. Demanding change. demanding their voices be heard. Which brings us to the question, why now? What finally broke the stalemate? Number 2. The moment everything changed. Late 2025. The pressure was building. U.S. naval forces increased their presence in the Caribbean. Not quietly, deliberately. Destroyers, submarines, patrol boats shadowing Venezuelan oil tankers. Some of those tankers, suspected of smuggling, were seized. The 2024 election fraud became impossible to ignore. Opposition leaders like Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez presented overwhelming evidence. The international community condemned it. The Venezuelan people refused to accept it. And the Trump administration began reframing Venezuela not just as a failing state, but as a threat. And when confirmation came, when they knew exactly where Maduro would be, the order was given. Keep those words in mind as we walk through what happened next. Because what happened in the early morning hours of January 3rd was unlike anything the January 3rd, 2026. Pre-dawn, around 2 a.m. The first wave hits without warning. Precision strikes disable Venezuela's air defenses. Communications towers go dark. Explosions ripple across Caracas. Not random destruction, but calculated strikes designed to blind and disable. Power outages spread across key districts. Not from bombs, but from a failing infrastructure finally collapsing under pressure. The second wave comes fast. Helicopters roaring through the darkness. Delta Force operators and federal agents descending on the fortified residence in Fuerte Tiuna. Resistance meets them immediately. Maduro's guards open fire. Cuban military advisors, his Praetorian Guard, hold defensive positions. Gunfire echoes through the complex, but surprise and overwhelming precision win. Room by room, corridor by corridor, the compound is secured. Within hours, they're aboard the USS Iwo Jima, a U.S. naval vessel waiting offshore. By morning, President Trump posts a photo. Maduro in custody, restrained. The image goes viral within seconds. And here's what shocks almost everyone. No occupation follows. American forces don't stay. They don't install a new government. They don't seize oil fields or plant flags. They complete the mission and withdraw. Target achieved. Mission accomplished. Hours, not days. A stunning success by any military measure. And read what Jesus actually said about moments like this. Matthew 24, 6-8. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Mark 13, 7-8 repeats the same framework. Luke 21, 9-10 adds detail. This isn't one isolated verse. It's a pattern Jesus emphasized across multiple accounts. Now, here's what birth pains means and why it matters for what just happened in Venezuela. Birth pains have three characteristics. First, increasing frequency. Contractions start far apart, then come closer and closer together. Second, increasing intensity. They start mild, then grow stronger. Third, increasing interconnection. One contraction doesn't happen in isolation. It's part of a progression leading to delivery. Now apply that to what we're watching. A superpower just conducted a military intervention in a sovereign nation. Not in the Middle East, where conflicts have become almost routine. Not in Eastern Europe, where tensions have simmered for years. In the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere. And not just to remove a leader, but to, in Trump's own words, temporarily oversee the country and its transition. That's frequency. Conflicts aren't decreasing, they're multiplying in new regions. That's intensity. That's interconnection. Because what happens in Venezuela doesn't stay in Venezuela. It affects oil markets. It shifts regional alliances. It sets precedents for future interventions. It creates ripples that touch every continent. And here's the line from Jesus that everyone misses. See that you are not alarmed. Not ignore it. Not pretend it's not happening. But don't let terror control you. Why? Because he told us this was coming. And then he said something even more important. But the end is not yet. Meaning, this isn't the final event. This is part of the pattern. The birth pains are intensifying, but we're not at the delivery moment. The casualty count remains unclear. The Venezuelan government hasn't released official numbers. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't want to say. What we do know is this. Within hours, the global order fractures along familiar lines. Russia issues a harsh condemnation. Vladimir Putin calls it a violation of international sovereignty and American imperialism in its most blatant form. Mexico frames it as a dangerous violation of sovereignty, a precedent that could be used to justify intervention anywhere. And the United Nations convenes to debate legality, jurisdiction, international law. Speeches are made, condemnations issued, resolutions drafted. But nothing changes, because the reality is stark. The United States holds veto power. But there's something else happening beneath the surface. Something the Book of Revelation warns about. Hold that thought, because the Book of Revelation describes a world that will eventually crave a strong hand during global chaos. A leader who promises peace and delivers control. A system that offers stability in exchange for compliance. Revelation 13:4 says they will worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast and who can fight against it?" Here's the human pattern that repeats throughout history. Crisis leads to fear. Fear leads to a demand for stability. The demand for stability leads to expanded control. And expanded control, once normalized, rarely contracts back. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This isn't just about a physical mark. It's about a system where compliance becomes the price of participation, where economic access is controlled, where authority consolidates to the point that opting out means being shut out. Now, is Venezuela that system? No. Is the U.S. operation in Venezuela the final fulfillment of Revelation 13? No. But here's what is happening. Crises train societies to accept what they used to reject. The Overton window, the range of politically acceptable ideas, shifts during crisis. And every shift makes the next shift easier. That's not speculation. That's observable human behavior. And it's precisely the kind of soil where Revelation's prophecies about centralized global authority can eventually take root. When Maduro was taken, Venezuela didn't collapse into chaos, but it didn't exactly stabilize either. And President Trump makes a statement that sends shockwaves through foreign capitals everywhere. The United States will temporarily oversee Venezuela's transition to ensure stability and facilitate free elections. We will protect civilians, we will maintain order, and then we will step back, temporarily oversee. Those words carry weight and implications. Venezuela's oil reserves immediately become a focus. Briefings for American energy companies, discussions about contracts and investment frameworks. Is this about justice? Or is this about resources? Again, maybe it's both. The military could shift at any moment. Regional powers could intervene. This isn't stability. This is a pause, a breath between what was and what might be. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will." Leaders rise, leaders fall, nations shift, but God's sovereignty remains. Venezuela is at a crossroads, and what happens next will shape not just one nation, but an entire region. Let's zoom out for a moment, because Operation Absolute Resolve isn't just about Venezuela. It's about precedent, about power, about what comes next. If the United States can arrest a sitting head of state for narco-terrorism and crimes against his own people, who else qualifies? Nicaragua's Daniel Ortega? The leadership in Cuba? Cartel-controlled regions throughout Latin America? Where is the line? And more importantly, who decides where that line is? For authoritarian regimes around the world, this operation sends an unmistakable message. You are not untouchable. Your borders are not sacred. Your palaces are not safe, even surrounded by walls and weapons and loyalists. That message terrifies some. It emboldens others. But here's the other side of this coin. What if this actually works? What if Venezuela stabilizes? What if free elections happen? What if refugees start going home instead of fleeing? What if removing Maduro actually saves lives in the long run? What if it breaks the cycle of corruption and violence that's plagued the region for decades? Then this becomes a model, a new kind of intervention, targeted, precise, justified not by regime change, but by criminal accountability. But that's a massive if, because history warns us. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Vietnam. The pattern is painfully clear. Removing a dictator is the easy part. Building what comes after, that's where good intentions go to die. Matthew 24:6 echoes in this moment. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Not alarmed, not panicked, but aware. So as believers, what do we do with all this information? What should you actually do with this information? First, pray for Venezuela, not as a prophetic chess piece, as a nation full of real people. Real families, real churches, real believers who are watching their country convulse. Pray for peace. Pray for protection. Pray for the gospel to advance even in chaos. Second, discern headlines without obsession. Yes, pay attention. Yes, recognize patterns. But don't refresh news sites every 5 minutes looking for the next sign. Jesus said to watch and pray, not to scroll and panic. There's a difference between alertness and addiction. Third, strengthen your faith habits. Matthew 24:42 says, "Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming." That doesn't mean lose sleep. It means don't be spiritually drowsy. Are you in the Word? Are you praying consistently? Are you connected to a local church body? Because when events accelerate, Your foundation matters more than your news knowledge. Fourth, share the gospel while there's time. Matthew 24:14 says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." The point of recognizing prophetic patterns isn't to build a bunker. It's to recognize urgency. If birth pains are intensifying, if the delivery is approaching, then the Great Commission matters more, not less. And let me repeat the guardrails one more time, because this is where people go off the rails. Patterns are not predictions with dates. Wars and rumors are biblical themes, not permission to claim this is the final war. America's absence from Scripture doesn't mean America doesn't matter. It means we don't speculate beyond what's written. And the goal, always, is readiness and gospel focus. And our job isn't to predict the schedule. It's to be found faithful when He arrives. So here we are, January 2026. A chapter closes in the most dramatic way imaginable. Nicolas Maduro sits in custody in New York today, facing trial. The man who seemed untouchable is now facing a courtroom. The limits of earthly power have been exposed in a single night.